Hey folks, tonight we're diving into the grim reality of being a medieval thief, a career that promised quick riches and thrilling escapades but usually delivered grime, danger, and an early grave. If you made it to 23, you were practically a veteran. Before you settle in, hit that like button and subscribe, only if you're genuinely into this kind of storytelling. Drop a comment about where you're watching from and the time there. It's wild to see how far this channel reaches. Now, dim those lights, maybe crank up a fan for some ambient noise, and let's unravel tonight's tale together. Picture this. You wake up in medieval Europe, broke, starving, and your only marketable skill? 2 functional legs. Congrats, you're now prime petty thief material. But let's be real, nobody chose this life. This wasn't some rebellious phase or a medieval Ocean's 11 fantasy. This was survival, plain and simple. The economy was a joke. Wages? A pittance, if you were lucky enough to have a job. Most peasants lived hand to mouth, except the mouth was toothless and the hand frostbitten. When crops failed or your lord demanded your last chicken and your dignity, you either begged or borrowed things permanently. Sure, you could try honest work. But honest work meant 14-hour days of backbreaking labor for a supper of barley paste and side of judgment. Your payment? A potato, a handshake, or the classic, exposure for your hard work. Meanwhile, that baker's coin purse sat there, plump and unattended. So yeah, people stole. Not because they were criminal masterminds, but because theft beat slow, decorative starvation. Here's the kicker. It took nothing to become a criminal. Steal bread? Theft. Grab a fallen apple? Theft. Chase a runaway chicken onto someone's property? Trespassing and poultry conspiracy. One toe in that legal quagmire, and you were branded. In a world where gossip spread faster than plague and grudges outlived kings, that mark stuck. So, you've embraced the thief life. You're nimble, motivated, and you've tied a rag around your face like a discount bandit. Time to find a target, right? Wrong. The biggest hurdle, besides avoiding the noose? Nobody had anything worth stealing. Most villagers were, "This potato is my dinner," and pillow poor. The average peasant owned 1 pair of pants, 2 spoons, and a goat named Uncle Steve. Their homes were cobbled together from mud, sticks, and wishful thinking. Jewelry? Coin purses? Some didn't even have purses, just knots of cloth holding their hopes together. That bulging pouch in the market? Turnip seeds and a dead mouse. Congrats, you've risked death for rodent protein. Nobles? Sure, they had gold, and also guards, attack dogs, castles, and a passion for punishing hat-touchers. Robbing them was like kicking a wasp nest with a torch, praying the wasps were polite. Churches had silver, but also locks, divine wrath, and a gossip network faster than a town crier. Steal a chalice? By lunch, you'd be cursed in the talk of the tavern. Grave robbing? Please. Dig all night just to find rocks and a pissed-off mole. Plus, everyone would assume you dabbled in dark magic, which came with extra problems. Stealth was key. You dreamed of gliding through shadows like a brooding antihero. Reality? You reeked like onions boiled in a goat's sock. Baths were rare, soap a luxury, and deodorant centuries away. Your disguise was stuffing herbs in your shirt, hoping to smell like a walking salad. You slept in pig pens, absorbing the ambience, not poetically, but in the 30% of your body is now barnyard filth way. So when you crept up on someone, they didn't hear you, they smelled you. Your outfit, the only one you owned, had its own personality, the kind that cleared rooms. And running in heavy wool? You were a sweat-soaked crime against nostrils. Guards didn't need hounds, they just followed the trail of regret. Did you hear that? No, but I smelled it. Blending into crowds? Forget it. Medieval crowds were right, but you were the human equivalent of a warning siren. Dogs? Man's best friend, unless you were a thief. Then they were furry traders with teeth. Every village had a chopper, or bitey, half feral beasts with a grudge and a bark that could wake the dead. Step on a twig? Bark. Breathe near a pantry? Bark. Suddenly, your cheese heist became a foot race against teeth and pitchforks. And once a dog hated you, that grudge lasted longer than a medieval winter. Locks were rare too expensive, but peasants got creative. Doors creaked like tortured ghosts. Bells hung like DIY alarms. Buckets of water balanced above thresholds. Twigs scattered like crunchy landmines. Rural traps? Think low beams, sharp tools, or, in one case, a welcome mat of hedgehogs. Chickens, walking panic buttons, geese, feathered bouncers with a vendetta. That unlocked door wasn't an invitation, it was a dare. Let's say you've somehow dodged the murderous geese, avoided the shrieking door alarms, and made it inside a peasant's home. Victory? Not so fast. Here's the brutal truth about medieval sleeping habits. No one actually slept. Not like we do today, at least. People in the Middle Ages didn't drift off into blissful REM cycles. They slept like paranoid squirrels, half awake, clutching sharp objects, ready to stab first and ask questions never. Living in medieval times was basically an extreme sport. Between bandits, plagues, taxes, and the occasional rogue boar, danger lurked everywhere. So when folks hit the hay, they did it in shifts, with one eye open and a weapon within reach. We're not talking fancy daggers here. Your average peasant's bedside arsenal included fireplace pokers, pitchforks, ladles that doubled as skull crackers, and, in a pinch, a suspiciously sharpened spoon. Anything that could dent a forehead was considered bedtime ready. Even families didn't trust the dark. Parents slept in huddled piles with their kids, not for warmth or affection, but because it was easier to defend one's centralized human fort. Imagine a game of angry Tetris with more body odor. And forget about sneaking past a guest room. Medieval homes were basically one cramped space, beds if you were lucky, straw mats if not, and always a snoring goat somewhere. Moving through this obstacle course required the agility of a ninja warrior contestant. The soundscape was no help either. Every house had its own symphony of creaking floorboards, sputtering firelight, and that one relative who shouted about pie theft in their sleep. More than one thief got caught because Granny bolted upright mid-dream, screaming about phantom pastry bandits. The truth? No one in the Middle Ages slept deeply. They just powered down enough to survive another miserable day. And if a floorboard groaned at the wrong moment, that wasn't noise, it was an invitation to attack first and regret later. Getting caught as a medieval thief wasn't just a bad day, it was a permanent career change. And not the learn from your mistakes kind. More like the they'll brand your face, so even goats judge you kind. Branding was very real, and not the trendy Instagram kind. We're talking red-hot iron pressed into your flesh by a constable with the bedside manner of a bear trap. Steal once, and you'd be marked for life, usually with a T for thief, V for vagabond, or sometimes just a sizzling stripe across your forehead because creativity had its limits. But cruelty didn't. This wasn't about justice. It was about portable shame, a permanent, hello, I steal things name tag written in scar tissue. Once branded, good luck finding work, shelter, or even a carrot without the vendor doing inventory checks. The process itself was often botched, performed by drunk blacksmiths or priests who read about it once. Results varied from legible letters to what looked like a losing fight with a fireplace. Get caught a second time? Now they got creative. Additional brands, finger chopping, or having half your head shaved, which was basically the medieval version of getting canceled on social media. In theory, medieval justice had a system. In practice, it often looked like 20 villagers, one shaky accusation, and a pitchfork with strong opinions. Welcome to trial by mob, where guilt was decided by who shouted loudest and whether you looked suspicious near someone's missing pie. Once the crowd turned on you, forget innocent until proven guilty. That concept was 500 years away. Your trial began with yelling, escalated to grabbing, and ended with projectiles, maybe a shoe, maybe a turnip, maybe the goat. Medieval mobs were unpredictable but committed. If you were lucky, someone official showed up. If not, you'd be tied to a post while the entire village took turns explaining how you'd personally ruined their day. Evidence? Circumstantial. Verdict? Decided by volume. Sentence? Whatever felt cathartic. Public shaming in stocks? Beatings? Dunking in the river while people screamed, confess. And I knew he looked like a sock thief. All options were on the table. Appeals? None. Your best defense was shouting, "It wasn't me," which mostly just encouraged harder turnip throws. Mob justice didn't care about truth. It cared about closure, fast, loud, and satisfying. Survive the ordeal? Congratulations. Now it's time for your starring role in the town's favorite pastime, humiliation theater. Public humiliation was the medieval version of going viral, except instead of likes and shares, you got rotting vegetables and permanent trauma. The stocks weren't just punishment, they were the hottest ticket in town for family entertainment. Imagine being folded into a wooden torture device like a human origami project, your limbs locked in place while the entire village lined up to take their best shot, literally. These weren't your grandma's timeouts. Stocks were designed for maximum discomfort and minimum dignity. You'd sit hunched like a broken deck chair for hours, sometimes days, through rain, snow, or particularly ambitious pigeons using your head as a landing pad. But the weather was the least of your worries. The real horror show was the audience. Medieval crowds treated stockbound thieves like interactive art installations. Spoiled food? Check. Manure? Absolutely. Children with deadly aim? The highlight of their week. Hey, that's the guy who stole the blacksmith's sausage. Someone would yell, just before the now petrified sausage itself came flying at your face. You couldn't even tune it out. Between the leg cramps, back pain, and villagers composing folk songs about your criminal incompetence, every moment was agony. Maybe, if the stars aligned, a sympathetic friend would sneak you bread. More likely, someone would steal your food while mocking your theft record. That's medieval irony for you. And the social scars lasted longer than the cabbage stench in your hair. After a stint in the stocks, you weren't just a thief, you were that guy from the stocks. The walking cautionary tale. The human punchline. But hey, at least you weren't being flogged. Yet. Ah yes, flogging, the medieval equivalent of getting off easy. Not because it didn't hurt, it absolutely did, but because it meant you still had all your limbs and a pulse when it was over. Picture the scene. You're tied to a post in the town square, surrounded by folks who definitely don't have better things to do, while some over-enthusiastic guard whips you with what's essentially a knotted rope of pain. No dramatic music, just the rhythmic thwack of leather on skin and helpful commentary from the crowd. Serves him right. I always thought he had bread thief face. The lash count depended on the crime, the judge's mood, or whether the executioner had a sore shoulder that day. Pass out? No problem. They'd splash water on you and keep going. Hydration was important, after all. But here's the twisted silver lining. If you were being flogged, it meant they decided not to brand, maim, or hang you. Bruised? Yes. Humiliated? Absolutely. But alive to steal another day, or at least limp home dramatically. Now let's say you actually pulled off the heist, swiped a purse, or nabbed some cheese. Time for your grand escape. Unless you had a getaway horse. You didn't. Your exit strategy probably involved awkward power walking through mud while villagers screamed, "Stop." Thief. And someone's grandma tried to trip you with a broom. Medieval towns were basically obstacle courses designed to foil criminals. Narrow, twisting streets clogged with argumentative monks, uneven cobblestones, and after rain, a fragrant stew of mud, straw, and regret. Your footwear? Worn-out leather shoes held together with hope, or worse, bare feet. Nothing tests life choices like sprinting from an angry butcher while your feet bleed into the communal sewage. Duck into an alley? Great idea, except most alleys were either dead ends or open-air latrines. Many a daring escape ended with a face full of, well, let's just say medieval urban planning wasn't big on emergency exits. Make it out of town? The countryside wasn't much better. Open fields left you exposed. Forests were full of people exactly like you who'd happily rob you for that stolen sausage. And villagers didn't just watch, chasing thieves was a community bonding activity. Farmers, merchants, kids, that one guy who really loved shouting. They'd all join the hunt, less out of civic duty and more because medieval life was boring. So you've survived the mob justice, endured the stocks, and somehow escaped with your stolen goods intact. Time to retire to your secret hideout and count your ill-gotten gains, right? Think again. Welcome to the grim reality of medieval criminal society, where your fellow thieves were more likely to stab you in the back than watch it. Forget romanticized notions of honorable rogue guilds meeting in candlelit taverns. Medieval organized crime was less Ocean's 11 and more a bunch of desperate outcasts fighting over moldy bread in a ruined barn. These weren't your charming Robin Hood types. They were a miserable collection of backstabbers, informants, and people who'd sell your shoes while helping you hide. Trust was a luxury no one could afford. Find a safe hideout? Someone would sniff it out and borrow everything, including the floorboards. Manage to hoard some food? Suddenly you're everyone's best friend, until you fell asleep, at which point you'd wake up robbed and possibly missing a tooth. The more desperate the times, the more cutthroat the competition. You weren't rubbing shoulders with noble bandits, you were sharing space with someone like Rancid Thomas, who once bit a man over a turnip and would sell you out for half a crust of bread. Even worse, these people were walking liability cases. Drunken brawls in the streets, screaming matches about stolen spoons, getting caught and naming every thief they'd ever met, including you and your cousin's goat. It was like being trapped in the world's worst improv troupe. Try to be a thief with principles? Too bad. To villagers, a thief was a thief. It didn't matter if you only stole to feed your starving sibling while others robbed churches and insulted livestock. You all got lumped together in one stinking, morally bankrupt pie. Now let's talk about what happened when your luck finally ran out. You might imagine medieval prisons as stone dungeons with iron bars and tragic roommates named Gareth. Reality? They were glorified broom closets for people waiting to be shamed, fined, or executed. If you were lucky enough to land in one, and what a sentence that is, your new home was essentially a wet hole in the ground beneath some lord's castle. Privacy? Forget it. You'd be tossed into a shared pit with drunkards, arsonists, suspicious-looking peasants, and that one guy who accidentally insulted the bishop's horse. Sanitation? Non-existent. Beds? Laughable. Food? Only if your family could bribe the guards with coins, favors, or a particularly impressive turnip. Otherwise, you survived on scraps, rainwater, and regret. Then came the boredom. No trials, no schedules, just endless waiting while smelling things that should be classified as biological weapons. Sometimes you waited for judgment. Other times you waited for someone to remember you existed. If the jail was full, congratulations, you got to be chained outside like a human scarecrow while passers-by critiqued your life choices and threw cabbages. After a week ankle deep in your own despair, even the gallows started looking like an attractive career move. And speaking of gallows, if you were a medieval thief who'd truly run out of options or chickens to blame, your final act played out on market day, because executions were equal parts punishment and public spectacle. These events were carefully scheduled. Your death was basically the medieval version of primetime entertainment. Families brought picnic lunches. Vendors sold snacks. If you were famous enough, someone might compose a rude ballad about you. Consider it the 14th century equivalent of trending on Twitter. The gallows themselves were brutally efficient. Just a wooden platform, some rope, and gravity doing the rest. If you were lucky, the drop snapped your neck instantly. If not, and let's face it, luck wasn't your strong suit. Things got awkward. Your body might hang for days as a gruesome billboard advertising the consequences of poor life choices. Occasionally, a kind cleric would offer last rites. More often, local artists would sketch your final moments in disturbingly graphic detail while the crowd murmured, "That's the guy who stole 3 onions." So you've survived your first few years as a medieval thief, dodged the pitchforks, endured the stocks, and even managed to keep all your fingers. Congratulations, you're now what passes for a seasoned professional in the criminal underworld. But the harsh truth is, your problems are just beginning. The life of an aging thief was a special kind of hell. At 25, you were already considered past your prime. Your joints ached from nights spent sleeping in ditches. Your reflexes slowed just enough to make rooftop escapes dicey propositions. Even the dogs seemed to recognize you now. That mangy mutt outside the baker's would perk up the moment he caught your distinctive, unwashed criminal scent. Winter was the great equalizer. While nobles huddled by roaring fires and peasants at least had drafty huts, you were stuck trying to steal warmth wherever you could find it. Barns became prime real estate, if you didn't mind sharing space with territorial livestock. More than one thief met their end when an angry sow decided her piglets didn't need a roommate. And the hunger, Christ, the hunger never went away. You dream about food so vividly it hurt. That half-rotten apple you pocketed yesterday became a feast fit for a king in your imagination. Sometimes you'd catch yourself staring at the butcher's scraps like a lovesick fool, calculating whether the guard dog was fast enough to catch you if you made a dash for it. The younger thieves didn't help matters. They'd come in all swagger and stupid ideas, talking big about robbing the goldsmith or the tax collector. You try to warn them. Listen, kid, that's how you end up dancing on air. But they never listened. Then a week later, you'd see their body twisting gently from the gallows. and you'd be left wondering if you should have tried harder to talk them out of it. Your old crew was either dead, imprisoned, or had gone legitimate, usually meaning they'd become someone else's problem. The new generation didn't trust you, saw you as a liability. Can't blame them really. You were slower now, more cautious. Where once you'd vault a fence without thinking, now you hesitated just long enough to get caught. The worst part? People remembered you. That baker whose window you broke 5 years ago still glared at you every market day. The blacksmith's wife would cross herself when you walked by. Even the village idiot knew better than to turn his back on you. Reputation was a millstone around your neck, growing heavier with each passing year. Some tried to reinvent themselves. A few joined pilgrimages, the medieval equivalent of joining the French Foreign Legion. Others signed on as mercenaries, trading one kind of danger for another. Most just kept stealing until their luck ran out, their skills eroded, or their bodies gave out. You'd hear stories sometimes. Old Tom the Cut-Purse who somehow ended up as a monk, though everyone knew he still had his fingers in every pie. Or Crazy Meg who lived in the woods and was said to curse anyone who came near her hovel. These were your possible futures, and none looked particularly appealing. The truth was, there was no retirement plan for people like you. No cozy cottage where old thieves could swap stories. Just the slow, inevitable decline into begging, desperation, and finally, if you were lucky, a quick end rather than a slow one. But tonight you had a lead on a merchant's house with a broken lock. Your knees ached and your hands weren't as steady as they used to be. But what else were you going to do? Starve quietly like a good little peasant? Not likely. You tightened your rag mask and checked your tools one last time. The game wasn't over yet. The merchant's house loomed before you like a promise and a threat. That broken lock you'd spotted yesterday, was it still unfixed? Or had some busybody servant noticed and set a trap? Your hands trembled slightly as you tested the door, the old familiar rush of adrenaline mixing with something new, doubt. At 28, you were practically ancient in thief years. The younger lads joked that you moved like a man walking through honey, though they still respected your ability to sniff out a mark from 50 paces. Experience had its perks, but it also meant you knew exactly how many ways this could go wrong. The door creaked open with only moderate protest. You froze, listening for the telltale jingle of alarm bells or the dreaded "who goes there?" But all you heard was the merchant's thunderous snoring from the upstairs chamber. The man slept like the dead, a trait you'd noted during 3 weeks of careful observation. Inside, the house smelled of beeswax and dried herbs. Your stomach growled at richer scents, roasted meat, good cheese, maybe even honey cakes. But you weren't here for food. The merchant's strongbox was your target, that heavy oak chest he'd carried in just yesterday after collecting rents. Moving through the darkened house, your body remembered its old grace despite the new aches. Years of practice let you avoid the loose floorboard near the stairs, the squeaky third step. The strongbox sat in the counting room, bathed in moonlight from a high window. Your breath caught. It wasn't even locked. Then you heard it, a sound that turned your blood to ice. A child's voice, sleepy but alert. "Papa? Is that you?" You turned slowly to see a boy of maybe 8 standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. His nightshirt was too big, his feet bare against the cold floorboards. For a heartbeat, you saw yourself at that age, hungry, curious, not yet broken. The boy's eyes widened as he took in your masked face, your rough clothes. He opened his mouth to scream. And in that moment, you did something no thief in their right mind should do. You pressed a finger to your lips and reached into your pouch, pulling out the one treasure you'd kept all these years, a carved wooden knight, its paint worn from years in your pocket. You'd stolen it from a noble's son when you were just a boy yourself. The child hesitated, fascinated despite himself. You placed the toy on the floor and kicked it toward him, then melted into the shadows as his small hands closed around the figure. The strongbox could wait. There were other merchants, other houses. Outside in the cold night air, you realized something strange. For the first time in a decade, you didn't feel like a thief. You felt like a man who'd just paid a debt he didn't know he owed. The realization was more unsettling than any guard's torchlight. Dawn found you sitting on the crumbling city wall, watching the first carts rumble through the gates. The wooden knight's absence in your pocket felt heavier than any stolen gold. What had possessed you to give it away? That toy had survived a dozen close calls, 3 prison stays, and the great flood of '82. Now it belonged to some merchant's brat who'd probably break it before noon. You spat into the moat below. Sentimentality was a luxury thieves couldn't afford. Last night's hesitation could have gotten you killed. Would have, if the boy had screamed. Yet here you were, alive and inexplicably lighter, as if you'd shed invisible chains along with that stupid carving. The city stirred below you like a great beast waking. Bakers pulled fresh loaves from ovens. The fishmonger's wife arranged her wares with practiced hands. A group of apprentices joked as they headed to work, their laughter carrying sharp in the morning air. Ordinary people with ordinary lives, a world you'd watched from the shadows for 20 years but never touched. Your stomach growled, reminding you why philosophy was for full-bellied priests. Time to find breakfast. The usual options presented themselves. The marketplace, too many eyes. The monastery kitchens, too many dogs. Or Widow Haggerty's back window. Her eyesight was going, but her aim with a rolling pin remained deadly. Then you saw him, the boy from last night, trailing after a harried-looking servant girl at the market. He clutched your wooden knight like a holy relic, showing it to every stallholder with solemn pride. Your chest did something strange when he pointed excitedly at the toy sword you'd whittled for the figure years ago. The servant dragged him toward the baker's stall, right past your hiding spot in the alehouse doorway. The boy's head turned suddenly, as if he'd sensed you. For one impossible second, your eyes met. Then the crowd swallowed him whole. Looking to drown your sorrows this early? The alewife's voice startled you. She eyed your ragged clothes with professional disinterest. We're just casing my taproom. You flashed your least threatening smile, which probably still looked like a grimace. Just admiring the craftsmanship of your doorframe, good wife. She snorted but slid a tankard across the counter anyway. That'll be 2 pence. And don't even think about lifting my spoons. The ale was terrible, which suited your mood perfectly. As you drank, you noticed the merchant from last night arguing with the tax collector. His booming voice carried across the square. And I'll thank you to remember my son is no liar. Found it right by the strongbox. He did. A cold finger traced your spine. The boy had told. Of course he'd told. You were halfway to the door when the merchant's next words stopped you dead. A gift from St. Nicholas himself, the lad says. Came in the night and left this blessed figure. The alewife chuckled. Old Gerald spinning that tale to everyone. Says it's a sign his fortunes will turn. She refilled your cup without asking. Funny thing is, the carving looks just like the one young Lord Pembroke lost years back. You choked on your drink. That toy's original owner would be a grown man now, probably with children of his own. The thought made your head spin. How many hands had that little knight passed through before finding its way back to nobility's orbit? The church bells rang sext, startling you from your thoughts. Time to move. You left an extra penny on the counter, not stolen, for once, and slipped into the crowd. The sun felt warmer on your face than it had in years. Maybe today you try your hand at honest work. Or maybe you just steal something small, for old time's sake. After all, even reformed thieves needed to eat. The next fortnight passed in a strange limbo. You took to haunting the market square each morning, watching the merchant's son play with his miracle knight. The boy had named it Sir Gallant and carried it everywhere, inventing elaborate adventures that made your throat tighten with something suspiciously like pride. Meanwhile, your criminal enterprise had dwindled to half-hearted pocket-picking. You told yourself it was the summer heat making you sluggish, not some newfound conscience. Yet twice now you'd returned stolen purses when you saw the desperation in their owner's eyes. This wasn't like you. The younger thieves were starting to talk. Lost your nerve, old man, sneered Red Dick, a hot-headed cut purse who'd arrived last winter. He flexed fingers still sticky from some poor sod's coin pouch. Maybe you should take up begging with the other graybeards. You considered breaking his nose. You still could, despite the ache in your knuckles, when a commotion at the baker's stall distracted you. The merchant's boy was sobbing, his precious knight smashed to splinters under the baker's boot. Filthy thief, the baker roared, shaking the weeping child. That's my wife's brooch you've got there. The boy's servant girl wrung her hands. But sir, he's had that toy for weeks. It couldn't be. Found it in my flour bin, didn't I? The baker shook the child harder. Just like his thieving father. Something inside you snapped. Before you could think better of it, you were across the square, your voice rough with disuse. The boy's innocent. The baker turned his fury on you. And who the devil are you? You swallowed hard. This was madness. One word from the merchant's son and you'd hang. But the boy's tear-streaked face decided you. I'm the thief, you said loudly. Stole that brooch 3 days past. Must have dropped it near the toy. Silence fell over the marketplace. The baker's grip slackened. The boy stared at you with wide, wondering eyes. Then Red Dick laughed, a harsh, braying sound. Listen to Grandad confessing. Shall we fetch the constable? The crowd stirred. This could still go very badly. You braced yourself. Enough. The merchant's voice cut through the murmurs like a sword. He pushed through the gathering, his face thunderous. My son is no thief, and neither is this man. He pointed at you with sudden recognition. You're the one who left Sir Gallant. The boy gasped. Papa, he's St. Nicholas. A dozen emotions warred on the merchant's face. Then, to your utter shock, he clasped your shoulder. Come, we'll discuss this privately. As he led you away, you caught Red Dick's dumbfounded expression. The last thing you saw before the merchant's door closed was the boy carefully gathering the broken pieces of his knight, as if they were made of gold. The merchant's house smelled different in daylight, beeswax and ink instead of night's shadowy secrets. He sat you at a table that probably cost more than everything you'd ever stolen, pushing a cup of spiced wine toward you with hands that trembled slightly. You're no saint, he said bluntly, but you're also no liar. You sipped the wine, good stuff, the kind nobles drank, and waited for the trap to spring. The boy huddled in the corner, clutching his broken knight like a shattered dream. The merchant rubbed his temples. My son hasn't stopped talking about that toy since it appeared. Claims an angel brought it. His sharp gaze pinned you. Now you show up to take the blame for a theft you didn't commit. What? The truth stuck in your throat like dry bread. How could you explain that seeing the boy punished for someone else's crime felt like watching your own childhood play out again? That you'd spent 20 years stealing to survive, but this single act of giving had filled some hollow place inside you? I owed a debt, you muttered at last. To your astonishment, the merchant laughed, a rich, rolling sound that made the boy peek up from his toys. God's teeth, a thief with honor. My wife would call that a miracle worth 10 of her missing brooches. He leaned forward, suddenly serious. That baker's been skimming flour for months. Everyone knows it, but accusing my son, his fist clenched. I could use a man who notices things. Someone who knows how people think when they believe no one's watching. Your cup froze halfway to your lips. Was he offering? Not as a guard. The merchant said quickly, my trade routes need scouts. Someone to spot which innkeepers water the ale, which toll collectors invent fees. A faint smile. Skills a man like you might possess. The boy chose that moment to tug your sleeve. Can you fix Sir Gallant? He held out the broken pieces with heartbreaking hope. Your hands, those clever, thieving hands that could pick a lock in seconds, took the fragments automatically. I'm no carpenter, lad. But you're magic, the boy said with absolute certainty. You came in the night and didn't steal nothing. The merchant's offer hung between you like a rope thrown to a drowning man. Outside, the marketplace buzzed with ordinary life. Somewhere out there, Red Dick was probably rifling through your meager belongings, laughing at the old fool who'd thrown away his freedom for sentiment. You looked at the broken knight, then at the boy's shining eyes, and made your choice. Fetch me some glue, you said. The glue proved harder to find than an honest guard in this town. While the merchant's servants rummaged through chests and cupboards, you sat at that fine table with the boy, showing him how to fit the knight's pieces together like a puzzle. Your fingers remembered the shape of the wood better than you'd expected, the curve of the shield you'd carved to hide a knothole, the notch in the sword where you'd once tried to sharpen it with a kitchen knife. See here, you said, pointing to the fracture along the knight's leg. This needs to sit just so, or he'll always limp. The words came out rougher than you intended. The boy nodded solemnly, his small fingers mimicking yours with surprising dexterity. The merchant watched from his ledger, his quill forgotten. You've handled that before, he observed. You kept your eyes on the broken toy. Had one like it. Long time ago. The lie tasted bitter. This was the same night, of course. The one you'd stolen from a noble's carriage when you were barely older than this boy. You could still remember the way the gilded paint had glittered in your grubby hands. How you'd sworn it was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. A servant finally returned with a pot of fish glue that smelled like low tide. As you worked, the boy's endless questions washed over you. Where did knights live? Did they really fight dragons? Could Sir Gallant be a dragon slayer when he was mended? Dragons are just stories, lad. You muttered, pressing a splintered piece into place. The boy's face fell. But Papa says there's dragons in the east, with scales like armor and breath like fire. The merchant chuckled. Merchant's tales, son. Though, he shot you a considering look. Our new scout might have seen stranger things in his travels. Your hand stilled. Our scout. The finality of it settled in your bones. This wasn't some temporary ruse. The man truly meant to take you into his household. A thief. A branded man. The glue pot wobbled as your fingers twitched. 20 years of watching your back, of sleeping with one eye open, and now what? You become some merchant's pet criminal? Live in his shadow until he tired of this charitable whim? As if reading your thoughts, the merchant pushed back from the table. Come walk with me. The courtyard was bright after the dim house. He led you to a small workshop where a carpenter planed wood alongside two apprentices. My brother-in-law's trade, the merchant said. Good work if you've the patience for it. You snorted before you could stop yourself. Think I'll take up carpentry now, do you? The merchant smiled. I think a man who can reassemble a broken toy knight might surprise himself. He picked up a scrap of oak, running his thumb along the grain. But the choice is yours. Scout, carpenter's helper, or... He nodded toward the gate. Whatever you were before. Back to stealing. Back to hunger and fear and the inevitable gallows. The thought should have been comforting in its familiarity. Instead, it tasted like ashes. From the house came the boy's delighted shout. Sir Gallant lives. You looked at your hands, scarred, nimble, capable of both theft and repair, and made your decision. The carpenter's workshop smelled of fresh-cut pine and linseed oil, a far cry from the stale ale and damp straw you'd called home for years. You stood frozen in the doorway, the merchant's expectant gaze heavy on your back. The carpenter himself barely glanced up from his workbench, where he was shaping what looked like a chair leg. New helper, he grunted, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm thick as a ham hock. The merchant clapped your shoulder. Says he's got hands for delicate work. The carpenter's skeptical look traveled from your scarred knuckles to the brand just visible under your ragged sleeve. His eyes narrowed. That's so. Before you could answer, the boy came barreling into the workshop, his repaired knight held aloft. Look, he fixed it better than before. Indeed, Sir Gallant now sported a tiny splint on his leg, your addition from a scrap of maple. The carpenter's expression softened as he examined the toy. Not bad, he admitted grudgingly. Then to you, know which end of a saw goes up. You opened your mouth to lie, but the boy cut in. He's magic with wood. Watch. He thrust the knight into your hands with terrifying faith. Under 4 pairs of watching eyes, you turned the little figure over, your thumbs finding the rough spots instinctively. The carpenter's tools gleamed on the wall behind him. Chisels, planes, awls. You'd used their like before, though never for honest work. Here, the carpenter said suddenly, tossing you a block of cherrywood and a knife. Carve me a spoon. The merchant raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. The boy held his breath. The knife felt alien in your hand, not a thief's quick blade, but a craftsman's deliberate tool. You began to whittle, the motions coming slower than they should, your fingers remembering old skills buried under years of survival. Shavings curled to the floor like wood lace. The spoon took shape, clumsy at first, then smoother as muscle memory woke. No one spoke. The only sounds were the knife's whisper and the carpenter's occasional grunt. At last, you held up your work, a simple but serviceable spoon, its bowl uneven but deep, its handle rough but strong. The boy gasped as if you'd carved the Holy Grail itself. The carpenter took it, turned it over, then surprised you by dipping it into his water bucket and drinking noisily. Humph. Won't win prizes, but it'll hold soup. He set the spoon down with a decisive thunk. Be here at dawn. And don't be late. I've a chest needs mending that's beyond your skill, but you can sand the panels. The merchant's smile could have lit the workshop. The boy hooped and hugged your legs hard enough to stagger you. And you? You stared at the spoon, at the humble, honest thing your hands had made, and felt something suspiciously like hope uncurl in your chest. Outside, the marketplace bustled on, oblivious to the small miracle in the carpenter's shop. Somewhere out there, Red Dick was still stealing, still running, still waiting for the noose. But you had a spoon. And come dawn, you'd have something more, a place to be. Dawn came too soon, and with it a pounding on your makeshift shelter's door. You jerked awake, one hand reaching instinctively for a knife that wasn't there. Hadn't been there since the day you'd walked out of the carpenter's workshop with sawdust in your hair and purpose in your step. Wake up, slowpoke. The boy's voice pierced through the thin wooden planks. Papa says if you're late on your first day, Master Call will feed you to his saw. You groaned and rolled off your pallet. A real pallet now, stuffed with clean straw instead of whatever rags you'd scavenged. The merchant had insisted on proper bedding, though he'd drawn the line at giving you a room in his house. Smart man. Old habits died hard, and no sense tempting fate. Outside, the boy danced from foot to foot, Sir Gallant clutched in one hand and a steaming meat pie in the other. Cook made this for you, he announced, thrusting the pie at you so forcefully that hot gravy splattered your tunic. Says even thieves turned carpenters need breakfast. You took the pie gingerly, the rich scent of beef and onions making your mouth water. Thought I was supposed to be your father's scout, you muttered between bites. The boy shrugged. Papa says good scouts need to know how things are made. Says you'll learn more in Call's workshop in a month than on the road in a year. He leaned in conspiratorially. Also, I think he's afraid you'll run off if he sends you away just yet. The pie turned to ash in your mouth. The little brat wasn't wrong. Part of you still itched to bolt, to disappear into the anonymity of the streets where no one expected anything of you beyond what you could steal. The workshop door stood open when you arrived, the smell of fresh wood shavings drifting out like an invitation. Inside, Master Call was already at work, his massive shoulders straining against his leather apron as he planed a long oak board. He didn't look up as you entered. Took your time, he grunted. Bench is there. Sandpaper's there. Chest panels are there. A calloused finger pointed to a stack of carefully cut wood. Smooth as a baby's bottom. All of them. Or you'll be redoing them till Christmas. You picked up the first panel, running your fingers along the edge. It was good work. Better than you could do, certainly. The wood was smooth already, but you set to work anyway, the rhythmic scrape of sandpaper filling the quiet workshop. The boy settled himself on a pile of sawdust, content to watch and occasionally offer unhelpful advice. That spot's still rough, he'd say, or Sir Gallant thinks you should go faster. By midday, your fingers were raw and your back ached in new and interesting ways. Master Call inspected your work with a critical eye, running his hands over each panel like a physician examining a patient. Passable, he pronounced at last. Then, to your astonishment, he handed you a chisel. Now watch close. Time you learn how dovetails are cut proper. The boy cheered. Your hands trembled. And in that moment, standing in a pool of morning light with tools in your hands and a child's faith at your feet, you realized with startling clarity. You were home. The changing seasons marked your progress better than any calendar. When you'd first come to the workshop, autumn leaves had clung stubbornly to the oak outside. Now winter's bite hung in the air, and your hands, once deft only for picking locks, could fashion dovetail joints that made Master Call grunt in approval. The boy came most afternoons after his lessons, perching on his favorite sawdust pile with Sir Gallant and a slate full of half-erased sums. Today he watched in uncharacteristic silence as you shaped a new leg for Mistress Adela's wobbling chair. You're quiet, you remarked, shaving a curl of walnut from the workpiece. He kicked his feet against the bench. Papa's sending me to my uncle in York next month. To learn merchanting. Your chisel slipped, nicking the wood. You swore under your breath, not at the mistake, but at the sudden hollow feeling in your chest. That's good. Important for a merchant's son. The boy scowled. I want to stay here. Learn carving from you. He held up Sir Gallant, whose splinted leg had become something of a workshop legend. You make broken things better. A lump formed in your throat. You set down your tools carefully. Listen, lad. Your father's giving you what I never had, a proper place in the world. Don't be in such a hurry to throw it away. But who'll help you when I'm gone? The question hung between you, fragile as the wood shavings at your feet. Master Call answered from his bench, where he'd been pretending not to listen. Plenty of broken chairs in this town, boy. Your carpenter's not going hungry. The boy didn't look convinced. That night, as you walked him home through the frosty streets, he suddenly pressed Sir Gallant into your hand. To remember me by, he said fiercely. You try to give it back. This is yours, lad. He shook his head. You need him more. To watch over you when I can't. Then, before you could protest further, he dashed up the steps to his house, leaving you standing in the snow with a wooden knight and a heart full of something you couldn't name. Back in your tiny room above the cooper's shop, a proper room now, with a proper bed, you placed Sir Gallant on the windowsill where the moonlight touched him. The splint on his leg had held firm, though the paint was wearing thin at the edges. You'd have to fix that. Outside, the first real snow began to fall, blanketing the town in quiet. Somewhere to the north, Red Dick was likely freezing in some ditch, still running, still stealing. You pulled your blanket tighter, a good wool one, bought with honest wages, and wondered if he'd ever know the strange comfort of a child's trust or the quiet pride of a day's honest work. Probably not. But then again, neither would you have, if not for a broken toy and a boy who saw magic where others saw only a thief. You blew out the candle. In the dark, Sir Gallant kept watch, his tiny sword pointing toward the dawn. Spring came late that year, the thaw revealing a town transformed, and not just by the seasons. The merchant's son had been gone 3 months when the first letter arrived, wrapped in a bundle of fine York wool the color of new leaves. You turned the parchment over in your hands, the unfamiliar weight of it making your palms sweat. Read it aloud, Master Call demanded, though you both knew he could decipher it perfectly well himself. You broke the seal with careful fingers, the boy's sprawling script bringing an immediate smile to your face. Dear Carpenter, York is full of fools who don't know a proper dovetail from a duck's backside. Uncle makes me count barrels all day. I told him you could build better barrels blindfolded. He says when I've mastered sums, I may visit. Tell Sir Gallant I've found him a lady knight in the market. Her name is Dame Brave. She has a chipped helm, but a very straight sword. Your friend, Thomas, but you may call me Tom. Master Call snorted into his beard. Cheeky pup. Thinks he's too grand for his name now, does he? But you saw the way his eyes lingered on the mention of barrels. That night, by candlelight, you began carving Dame Brave from a scrap of cherry wood. Her sword you made extra long to compensate for the chip in her helmet. When she was done, you set her beside Sir Gallant on your windowsill, where they stood guard over your tools and your strange new life. The letters kept coming with each season's turn. Tom wrote of York's towering minster, of the great ships in the river, of his uncle's booming trade in Flemish cloth. Between the lines, you read his loneliness, his pride, his slow transformation from boy to merchant's apprentice. You wrote back, at first with clumsy letters dictated to the parish priest, then later in your own hesitant hand. Your news was smaller, a new bench commissioned by the bailiff, Master Call's latest bout of rheumatism, how Dame Brave and Sir Gallant now presided over a growing wooden army of your making. One rainy afternoon, as you polished a set of maple spoons for Tom's next name day, Master Call cleared his throat in that particular way that meant he had something difficult to say. The boy's father was here, he said at last. Wants a traveling chest made, for when Tom comes home. Your polishing rag stilled. Home? Master Call nodded. Seems the uncle writes the lad's got a head for numbers, but no stomach for cheating customers. Merchant thinks he'll do better here, where people know his face. He gave you a sideways look. And his carpenter. The spoon in your hand caught the light. its surface smooth as glass from all your careful polishing. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle, and for the first time in months, a patch of sunlight found its way through the clouds to touch Dame Brave's waiting sword. The day Tom returned, the workshop smelled differently, not just of sawdust and linseed oil, but of the exotic spices clinging to his yerkwolens. He burst through the door like a summer storm, taller than you remembered, his voice cracking between boyhood and manhood as he recounted his adventures. "Look what I brought." He thrust a bundle into your hands. Fine carving tools from Flanders, their steel blades gleaming in the workshop light. "The merchant said these are for masters only, but I told him you were the best carpenter in 3 shires. Master Call snorted from his bench, but you saw the approval in his eyes as he examined the tools. "Might finally stop butchering my good chisels," he muttered, though the corner of his mouth twitched. Tom barely paused for breath, pulling more treasures from his pack. A length of ebony for something special, a bottle of French walnut stain, and finally, carefully wrapped in lamb's wool, Dame Brave's market-bought counterpart. The wooden knight stood proudly beside her, her chipped helm now repaired with a delicate application of gold leaf, Tom's own handiwork. "Uncle's clerk taught me gilding," he said proudly, then added in a whisper, "though I like carving better." As the afternoon light slanted through the workshop windows, you found yourself demonstrating the new tools on a scrap of the ebony, showing Tom how the grain differed from local woods. His hands, once so small clutching Sir Gallant, now moved with surprising skill as he tried the techniques you'd taught him before his departure. Master Call watched this exchange over the rim of his tankard. When Tom stepped out to greet other well-wishers, the old carpenter spoke quietly. The merchant was asking after apprenticeship papers. "Seems his son's set on learning proper woodcraft." He fixed you with a steady look. "You'd make a poor master, but the boy's stubborn as his father." The tools in your hands suddenly weighed more than mere steel and wood. You looked at Dame Brave standing sentry on your bench, her golden repair catching the light, and understood this was no longer just about fixing broken toys or even building chests. That evening, as you walked Tom back to his father's house through streets that somehow felt smaller, he asked the question you'd been dreading. "Will you teach me?" "Properly, I mean. Father says I may split my time between ledgers and learning." The words hung between you, heavier than any confession you'd made in the stocks years before. You stopped beneath the oak tree where you'd first watched him play with Sir Gallant, its new spring leaves whispering overhead. "I'm no master," you began, but Tom interrupted with all the certainty of youth. "You're mine." And in that moment, standing between the workshop and the merchant's house, between your past and his future, you realized the greatest truth of all. Some broken things, once mended, become stronger at the cracks. The first official lesson began disastrously. Tom, in his enthusiasm, nearly took off his thumb with the new Flanders chisel. You grabbed his wrist just in time, the blade stopping a hair's breadth from his skin. Both of you froze, breathing hard, the near accident hanging between you like a specter. "Right," you said hoarsely, releasing him. "First rule, never point the sharp end at anything you care about." Tom's face was pale, but he managed a shaky grin. "Does that include my future livelihood?" You showed him how to hold the tools properly, your hands guiding his just as Master Call had once guided yours. His fingers were longer now, the softness of childhood replaced by the beginnings of a merchant's calluses, but they still fumbled like yours had years ago. Master Call observed from his corner, pretending not to watch as you walked Tom through the basics of grain direction and tool angles. When Tom finally produced a recognizable, if lopsided, spoon, the old carpenter grunted and tossed a block of cherrywood onto the bench. "Try that," he said. "Softer than ebony for your delicate merchant hands." As summer deepened, a rhythm developed. Mornings Tom spent with his father learning accounts, afternoons in the workshop with you. He proved surprisingly adept at carving, though his impatience showed in the occasional jagged edge or uneven surface. One particularly hot afternoon, as you both sweated over a commission for the baker's new shelves, the very same baker who'd once accused Tom of theft, the man himself came in, red-faced and wheezing. "Need a new stool," he announced, eyeing you with barely concealed suspicion. "One that won't collapse under a man's proper weight." Tom opened his mouth, no doubt to make some sharp comment about the baker's considerable proper weight, but you stepped on his foot. "Hard. We'll have it ready by market day," you said smoothly, taking the coins the baker offered. When he'd gone, Tom glared at you. Why take his money? After what he... Because that's what craftsmen do, you interrupted. We build for whoever pays, and let the work speak for itself. Tom scowled, but returned to his carving with renewed vigor. 2 days later, he presented the baker with a stool so sturdy you could have stood an ox on it, and so finely carved with wheat sheaves and rolling pins that the man's eyes bulged. Didn't know you had such skill, the baker muttered, running thick fingers over the designs. Tom smiled sweetly. My master teaches me all kinds of things, including how to spot when someone's skimming flour. The baker turned an impressive shade of purple, but he paid without complaint. As he left, Master Call burst into wheezing laughter that nearly brought on a coughing fit. Merchant's son through and through, he gasped when he'd recovered. Could sell snow to a Norseman, that one. You looked at Tom, who was trying and failing to hide his grin, and felt an odd pang. The boy was growing into a man before your eyes, one who could hold his own in both workshop and marketplace. Soon he wouldn't need your guidance anymore. As if sensing your thoughts, Tom tossed an apple core at your head. Stop looking so maudlin. We've got that chest for the priest to finish, and you still haven't shown me how to do proper inlay work. Master Call snorted. Better teach him quick. God knows what abomination he'll create otherwise. The old carpenter's gruff tone couldn't hide the pride in his eyes. And as you set about explaining the intricacies of inlay to Tom, his head bent close to yours over the workpiece, you realized something. Some bonds, once forged, didn't break. They simply took new shapes. Autumn brought the harvest fair, and with it, your greatest test as a craftsman and as a teacher. The guild had announced a woodworking competition, with the winner's pieces to be displayed in the town hall. Master Call dropped the news one morning by slamming the announcement parchment onto your workbench. You're entering, he declared. Both of you. Tom nearly dropped his chisel, but I've only been learning since. Since the snow melted, Master Call finished. Long enough to know if you've got any real talent. His gnarled finger jabbed at the rules. Apprentice and master submit separate pieces. Judges won't know who made what. You understood the old man's game immediately. This wasn't just about the competition. It was about forcing Tom to stand on his own skills, and about proving to yourself that you could teach as well as you could craft. The weeks that followed transformed the workshop. Tom became a demon of concentration, his usual chatter replaced by the steady scrape of steel on wood. He worked late into the nights, chasing an idea he refused to share. You pretended not to notice when he smuggled candles from his father's house, or when he fell asleep curled on the sawdust pile, a half-carved block still clutched in his hands. Your own project took shape more slowly, a jewelry box with secret compartments, its lid inlaid with an intricate pattern of oak leaves and acorns. The design came to you in fragments, like memories surfacing from deep water. You realized with a start that you were recreating the chest your own father had once made for your mother, before the fever took them both. The night before submissions, Tom finally revealed his piece, a carving of Sir Gallant and Dame Brave standing back to back, their swords raised against some unseen foe. The figures were rough in places, the proportions slightly off, but the energy in their poses took your breath away. They're guarding the workshop, Tom explained, running a thumb over Dame Brave's sword. Like you and Master Call guarded me. Master Call examined it in silence, turning the carving this way and that. Finally, he set it down with exaggerated care. Could use more sanding on the base, he grumbled. But the gleam in his eyes betrayed him. The judging took 3 agonizing days. When the town crier finally came to the workshop, his announcement sent Tom leaping over a bench. Third place to Thomas Fletcher for The Guardians. Second to the York Carver for it. Tom didn't hear the rest. Third, he crowed, shaking you by the shoulders. Against proper guild apprentices. Master Call cuffed him lightly. Mind your pride, boy. It's first place. The crier continued loudly to the oak leaf jewelry box with hidden compartments. Maker's name given as. He squinted at the parchment. Just the carpenter. The workshop fell silent. You stared at the crier, then at Master Call, who was suddenly very busy examining his chisels. Tom's grin could have powered a mill wheel. Seems we've both got something to celebrate, he said, pressing a tankard into your hand. Master. The word hung in the air, weightier than any title. Outside, the autumn leaves swirled in the courtyard, gold as the gilding on Dame Brave's helm, and for the first time in your life, you thought you might finally understand what it meant to belong. Winter came early that year, frosting the workshop windows with delicate patterns that Tom declared looked like wood grain for fairies. You were showing him how to carve the same designs into a keepsake box when the merchant arrived, his usual composed demeanor frayed at the edges. "Word from York," he said without preamble. "My brother's taken ill. The physicians say." He trailed off, glancing at Tom. The boy's, no, the young man's, hands stilled on his carving. "How bad?" "Bad enough I must go." Immediately, the merchant's gaze shifted to you. "I'd take Tom, but the roads are treacherous this season, and his studies." You set down your chisel. "He'll stay with me." The words left your mouth before you'd fully considered them, but they felt right. The merchant nodded, relief softening his features. "I've arranged rooms at the inn." "I've a perfectly good cot in the workshop loft," you interrupted. "No sense wasting coin." An awkward silence fell. Tom looked between you and his father like a spectator at a tennis match. Finally, the merchant sighed. "Very well, but I'm paying for his meals at the tavern. And a proper winter cloak." He fixed you with a stern look. "Not that ratty thing you call a coat." After he'd gone, Tom exhaled sharply. "Well, that was your father being your father," you finished. "Now stop gawping and fetch your things. And don't forget Dame Brave, she'll freeze in that drafty house of yours." The loft above the workshop was cramped but snug, warmed by the heat rising from the brick forge below. You'd slept there often when working late, but sharing the space felt different. Tom's belongings, a stack of books, his precious carving tools, the growing collection of wooden knights, transformed it from a shelter to something resembling a home. That first night, as a winter gale rattled the shutters, Tom suddenly spoke into the darkness. "Do you think Uncle will die?" The question hung in the cold air. You thought of the fever that had taken your own family, of how quickly life could change course. "I don't know," you said at last, "but your father's stubborn as a mule. If anyone can bully his brother into living, it's him." Tom's quiet laughter warmed the loft better than any brazier. Soon after, his breathing evened into sleep, leaving you to watch the frost patterns creep across the window and wonder at the strange turns of fate that had brought you here. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Mornings began with Tom complaining about the cold as he struggled into his boots. Evenings with shared meals at the tavern where Mistress Nell fussed over him like a mother hen. In between, the workshop hummed with activity, Tom's quick hands learning to turn wood on the lathe, your own slower but more precise movements guiding him. Master Carl observed it all with gruff approval, though he took to sending you both home early when the light faded. "No sense working blind," he'd grumble. "Wood doesn't care if it's carved today or tomorrow." One particularly bitter afternoon, as you were packing up tools, Tom suddenly asked, "Did you ever think about leaving?" You paused, a half-carved box in your hands. "Every day. Why didn't you?" The answer came more easily than you expected. "Nowhere better to go." Tom nodded as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. That night, as you banked the workshop fire, a commotion at the door announced the merchant's return. He looked exhausted but triumphant, snow dusting his shoulders like flour. "Brother's mending," he announced, embracing Tom. Then, to your surprise, he clasped your arm. "I see you've kept my son alive. And out of trouble, by some miracle." Tom rolled his eyes. "Mostly." As the merchant herded his son home, plying him with questions about his studies, you lingered in the suddenly too quiet workshop. The loft would feel empty tonight without Tom snoring and the occasional thump when he rolled off the narrow cot. Master Carl appeared at your elbow, 2 steaming mugs in hand. "Missed the noise already, do you?" You accepted the drink with a grunt. The old carpenter chuckled and raised his mug in salute. "To family," he said simply. And for once, you didn't correct him. Years have a way of slipping through your fingers like fine sawdust. One day you're teaching a boy how to hold a chisel, the next you're watching that same boy, now a man with children of his own, teach his daughter the same motions in the very same workshop. The town has changed around you. The baker who once accused Tom of theft is long gone, replaced by his grandson who brings you sweet rolls every market day. Master Carl rests under a headstone carved with oak leaves and tools, just as he'd requested. And you? You're the old carpenter now, your hair gone white, your hands gnarled but still steady. Today is special. Tom's daughter, little Margot with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, is attempting her first solo project, a wooden cat for her baby brother. You watch from your chair by the window, the one Tom made for your stiff joints, as she frowns in concentration, her tongue poking out just as Tom's used to. Master Carpenter, she says solemnly, using the title she invented when she could barely talk. Is this paw too big? You examine the lopsided carving with exaggerated care. Depends. Is it a giant's cat? Margot giggles, and the sound mingles with the familiar music of the workshop, the scrape of tools, the whisper of wood giving shape to imagination. On the windowsill, Sir Gallant and Dame Brave stand guard as they have for decades, their swords still bright, their splints and repairs now part of their story. Tom arrives as afternoon light gilds the dust motes, his arms full of market purchases. He sets down a bundle wrapped in familiar York wool, the same color as that first letter so long ago. For you, he says, unfolding the cloth to reveal a set of new tools, their steel gleaming in the sunlight. Margot gasps. They're beautiful. You run a trembling finger along a chisel's edge, remembering another boy's excitement, another gift of tools. The circle feels complete, yet still spinning onward. Tom meets your gaze, his eyes crinkling in the way that means he's trying not to show emotion. Thought you might teach Margot how to care for proper steel. Outside, spring blossoms drift past the window like snow. Inside, the workshop hums with life, past, present, and future. You take the smallest chisel and press it into Margot's waiting hands, guiding her fingers as so many hands once guided yours. First lesson, you say, your voice rough with years and something else. Never point the sharp end at anything you care about. And as Margot's laughter fills the workshop, as Tom smiles that same boyish smile, as the wooden knights stand vigil on their sunlit sill, you realize this. Some stories don't end. They just take new shapes in fresh cut wood, in passing down of tools and tales, in the endless, beautiful work of creating something that lasts.